My name is John Lobell. I teach architecture at Pratt Institute in Brooklyn, New York. This is a presentation I did for a conference on the liberal arts and the education of the artist. The conference was arranged by the School of Visual Arts in New York and was in October 2014. Thank you. Okay, so my name is John Lobell. I teach architecture at Pratt Institute, and I'm sort of in a running battle with the liberal arts people at Pratt. And I'm the biggest... I don't think so.
No editorializing.
So I'm the most liberal artist you could imagine. I mean, I really believe in this stuff. I just don't necessarily believe in what they're doing or how they're doing it. So it occurs to me that it really should be can be integrated with everything we're doing, including studio and art history. So how might this happen? So quick about me. Studied architecture at the University of Pennsylvania with some interesting people, Louis Kahn, Bob Venturi, and my incredible dean. And figure most influential on me was Edmund Bacon, who built the modern city of Philadelphia. But a totally Hegelian sense of a culture's inner worldview and how that got manifest in the form of its city. And these kinds of things underlie how I think. I worked for Harrison Abramovitz on the Albany Mall, worked for Oleg Franz on a really interesting research project on new technology in the city, did some environmental art, wrote some books, Louis Kahn on Joseph Campbell, book on ecology, and I'm consultant on a project called Timeship, which I'll tell you a little bit about, and consult with a company that does the largest fabricator of large-scale sculpture. We've been doing it since the early 1960s for major artists. You can find my lectures on YouTube. I have a website that looks at movies from a mythological point of view. I just finished a book on visionary creativity, and I have a website for that, and I blog at johnlobell.com and teach architecture at Pratt over the years in a lot of different areas. So what is architecture? And I'm sitting in academic senate, and the woman who's the chair of liberal arts and humanities or whatever, I'm excited to learn that architecture is one of the artisanal disciplines. So, apparently has something to do with making bread in these trendy bakeries. And so apparently we're supposed to teach about how to use bricks, and the liberal arts teaches what it means. So then I think, bricks. Okay, so Frank Lloyd Wright said, what is honor? Not the rules of a code, but the nature of honor. What would be the honor of a brick? That in the brick which makes the brick a brick. Now, what does that mean? Well, let's go a little further. Louis Kahn begins every project with the question, what does this building want to be? In other words, what you're doing at school, what is the meaning of education? And you say to brick, what do you want, brick? And brick says, I like an arch. And it's best fleshed out by the pioneer of American modern architecture, Louis Sullivan. The germ is the real thing, the seat of identity. Within its delicate mechanism lies the will to power, the function, which is to seek and eventually to find its full expression and form. There's a lot of Nietzsche and Heidegger in here. So architecture is able to think a bit about these larger issues. So I think philosophically, in terms of what the liberal arts does, there's only one question. It has two parts. Who are we and what are we doing here? So let's look at, how does art history address that? And you can look at Cimabue, and it sees a spiritual self, but it doesn't have physicality. That physicality is introduced with the Renaissance. That physicality of the Renaissance draws upon Greek notions, begins the idea of a human being as a machine, and puts the human being in nature, sort of laying down a Western notion of what a human being is. Raphael's School of Athens is really about a person. All these parts, Plato and Aristotle and all the artists, poets, philosophers, mathematicians, are what makes up the Renaissance man, the whole self. Big debates, are we created by God, or is God within the human imagination? This is the section of the human brain. Michelangelo isn't going to come out and say it out loud, but You know, this was discovered about 15 years ago. People have been looking at this for 500 years, and and suddenly says, now these guys knew their anatomy. They did cadaver anatomy. How do you like that? Yes, God transmits a spark of life to Adam, but God is in the human imagination. God is not, which he's not going to say out loud. But now, here we are.
We're not going to discuss that.
A portrait, not too much going on behind the eyes. But with the Baroque, Rembrandt's self-portrait, begin to get emotional depth. The sadnesses that he accumulates over his life, the death of his wife, the death of his child, his being banned from selling his paintings, and you look at all of his self-portraits and you see the building up of this character. And then with the Enlightenment, the frivolity of the Fragonard, the scientific depth of Joseph Wright of Derby, and then the sublime with Romanticism. You think that your rationality can comprehend the depth of the human psyche or the power of nature, and then finally the insecurities of modernism, and then the whole thing comes apart. So we've built up the Western human being. What is a human being? It's, we're here. Well, we're not. Look at Chinese culture, Chinese notion of a human being, Indian notion of a human being. Totally different. This is the West building up its notion of a human being, which we're doing through the arts. Now, where's this person going to live? And, of course, Palladio's Villa Rotunda, which puts the human being in the center to survey out at the center of an XYZ coordinates. The dome is not a dome of heaven, but the Z-axis marking the human being who surveys and controls nature. So let's see how we make a building. Rembrandt builds up this portrait through this layering of the brushstroke, and why when our studio painters were teaching history, it had this kind of depth. And maybe we can see a building in a similar sense. So here's Medical Towers by the architect Louis Kahn. Begins with a reaction against Mises Seagram building, building at the time of the organization man, the man in the gray flannel suit. Kahn pulls the building apart. He's going to do something very different. He refers back to Rome and the richness of Rome, which architectural history had been banned by modernism. And then this plan, he starts with, what is science? And the scientist first works with the test tube. You want a flexible space for the desks, away from the light. And then the scientist takes their notes and goes to the window to move from the measurement part of science to the unmeasurable, which is a cultural act of rendering this into a theory. We've got to support this. We need our fire stairs, egress, ventilation. We have 3 of these. We've got our building. And this is put together like Lego blocks out of these precast pieces of concrete. And what I just told you, which in my Kahn course is 3 hours, I just did it in 3 minutes. Every time you walk into the building, he is telling you that story that I just told you. And Kahn says, the man is the record of the making of the man. The building is the record of the making of the building. It's a whole philosophical attitude as to what a human being is, how it is built up, and what that means to us. So from that point of view, who are we today? Lao Tzu says, do you think he can take over the universe and improve it? I don't think it can be done. Ray Kurzweil says, the ongoing expansion of our future superintelligence will then require moving out to the rest of the universe where we may engineer new universes. So here is Seth Lloyd. This is a textbook on how to reprogram the universe. This is a conference or a group, 2045, Russian oligarchs designing avatars in which to download themselves. This is Timeship, I'll tell you a bit more about, that I work on. Our clients intend to be immortal and are doing the research on genetic engineering to turn off aging. So here is this Western human being. What's the word to describe what I just described? Hubris! And here is an Eastern attitude. This is also a villa, Katsura Imperial Villa, integrated with its landscape. Totally different attitude about the human place in nature. Now, here is Palladio, here is Katsura. which one is Frank Lloyd Wright more like? And now we have a philosophical discussion about what the human relationship is to nature. If we take this point of view, what about the future? So 1953, Watson and Crick decode DNA, 4 letters, 2 rules, you can build all of life. Around the same time, 1953, Stanislav Ohm and Johnny von Neumann is saying, how would you build machines that could reproduce themselves? And Ohm says, well, you want to look at cellular automata, which Stephen Wolfram does, simple rules making infinite complexity. And Wolfram says, I think when I find the code that generates our universe, it'll be about 6 lines. And he's working on it. So go to YouTube and put South by Southwest, and Wolfram get his latest lecture. He describes where he is right now. He's getting there. So this is one of my colleagues at Pratt, Haresh Lalvani, works in 27 dimensions, finding the underlying genome of all forms, from which he can then build this entire 27-dimensional universe, in which is located any possible human-made or natural form, uses that to generate his architecture. Another colleague, Carl Shu, gives his students 3 genes, A, B, and C. At the beginning of the semester, by the end of the semester, building has grown itself. So we see these architects engaged with these cutting-edge ideas. So in this continued discussion, should we allow industry into the academy? These horrible people, like maybe architects. So what do architects do? This artisanal discipline. This is a project being done by one of my students, who's a very prominent architect now, Steve Valentine, and he's working on a $300 million research facility, biotech facility for extreme life extension. By life extension, they don't mean vitamins too. They mean turning off aging. You get hit by a bus, you die. You don't get hit by a bus, you live thousands of years. So our clients are working on that, and we're designing the facility. I'm director of research for the project. And this is the stuff that we're engaged with, and I'm not going to go through all this, but yes, there's the architecture, designing the building. But site selection, global warming, national borders, the program, engineering, projecting it, and then broader issues. So we're dealing with bioethics, stem cell research, DNA research, and genetic engineering, transhumanism, cyborgs, life extension research, the ethics of all of this, immortality and death. And we work with the leading people in the world in these fields on this project. So we might describe the liberal arts as an attempt to understand who we are and what we're doing here through intellectual means, but is not understanding this also a role of the arts. Indeed, the arts, particularly architecture, go beyond understanding to embody. I like to say to my students after I do a lecture on painting, okay, history of art is to art what sex education is to sex. You just saw a lecture. Now go to the galleries, go to the museums, go across campus to the painting students and go to their studios and actually experience directly embodied in the arts, which the arts can do for us. And so that's how I try to present architecture. Thank you.